everyone. Welcome back to the Lutheran Worship Podcast presented by the Center for Worship Leadership at Concordia University, Irvine. We are your hosts. My name is Kip Fox. I'm joined by the Director of the Center for Worship Leadership, Professor Steve Zank. How are you, Steve?
Hey, Kip. Hey, good. How are you?
I'm doing...
Go ahead. I should wait for you to answer before.
I'm doing well. Thank you. What were you going to say?
Is today the culmination of Luther's view of music? Is this it?
It is. How did you know that? Wow.
We're getting to very practical.
We're getting very practical today. This is part 5, I think.
I love it. I love it. I also want to say I love it in the comments, people asking to read your thesis. I mean, that's such a compliment. I mean, they hear this little tidbits from the thesis. They want to go into it further. So that's really cool. And this has all been based on Kip's master's thesis, by the way, if you're catching us late in the game. And what a pleasure to talk to you and learn from you about all your studies and Luther and his view of beauty and music and all that.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Yeah, so today we're just going to wrap it up with a few, maybe just talk a little bit more practically about how some of these things apply. Last episode, we did this deep dive into Luther's theology. We talked about, for Luther, music being a gift of God and how music as gift really sets a foundation for all sorts of ways that we view music theologically. And in the same way, music used for proclamation sets us up for all sorts of interesting ways to look at how we use music in our worship services. And today we are going to continue in that line, but just in a little bit more of a practical application sort of thing. We'll just cover a few more items, maybe even dive back into some of the things like emotion and instrumentation, sacred and secular borrowing, those kinds of things. But just maybe have a little bit more of a conversation of things that come to mind when we come across this. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. Last episode, we went double time, and I think today we'll be back to our regular scheduled programming, much to the chagrin of one of our friends who just wants more time. But for those of you that are very busy, you're going to love this episode. Okay? So let's do this. We've shown the sharp contrast of Luther's ideas on these subjects. Exciting to be Lutheran musicians, isn't it, Steve? Isn't it exciting to be a Lutheran musician?
It's a good
composer?
thing. It's a good thing. There's a lot of freedom in it. There's a lot of intentionality behind it. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of tools at our disposal.
Exactly, and I think there's this beautiful freedom, and today we're going to talk about that freedom, and then also talk about, again, like we do in so many of our other podcasts, really both sides of the fence, and how we can really serve our neighbor in freedom, but also being a slave to all, as Luther would say. So let's get into it. Our first order of business for practical applications, I want to talk just a little bit about high art versus low art. Steve, answer this question for me. What is a more sophisticated instrument, a cello or an electric bass? What's more sophisticated, Steve?
Cello.
Oh, yeah, you would think that, so wouldn't you?
Well, there's no frets on a cello. Intonation matters a lot. Electric bass, weather can be really interesting part of the cello and how it's played, and I feel like also the way it's shaped can change a tone a lot. Electric bass's tone is a lot in the pickups, right? So cello.
There are fretless basses. I just want you to know there's fretless basses.
Oh, is it a fretless bass?
You tell me.
Well, what are your thoughts, Kit? Which one's more sophisticated?
I think the sophistication lies in the player, Steve. This is what we're trying to get at here.
Yeah.
So you make some very compelling arguments, but I would argue you're wrong on all accounts. So I want to talk a little bit about this break in music history that sort of set up this debate between what is more sophisticated art or music and what is maybe more popular or even less sophisticated music.
Yeah.
Simon Frith unpacks the history of musical taste-making, pointing to an early 19th century split in musical values. Under the influence of Romanticism, German classical music came to be seen as high art, while forms of composed music, Italian opera, for example, or virtuoso performance, soon to be embodied in Liszt, were seen as popular. Okay, so you had this high art versus popular music.
Yeah.
The sociological split became the new reality, giving us one of the main misconceptions Frith sees today. He goes on to say, the art-music discourse is organized around a particular notion of musical scholarship, a particular concept of musical talent, and a particular sort of musical event, in which music's essential value is its provision of a transcendent experience that is, on the one hand, ineffable and uplifting, but on the other, only available to those with the right sort of knowledge, the right sorts of interpretive skills. Only the right people with the right training can, in short, experience the real meaning of great music. So, I say in my thesis that all music, whether high or low art, offers and derives the same meaning. This is in line with Luther's theology, which places human beings as receivers of beauty and not attainers. When art forms such as music are seen as gifts of God instead of windows into secret sanctuaries of the divine, we're no longer bound to assign priority to certain forms over others. Now, Steve, just as we, again, that's all some big sort of thesis sentences there to wrap things up. But what I wanted to get at today, and again, we want to talk about both sides of the fence here, is we've had in our church body perhaps, and really in society, we have this split where the highly educated or the sophisticated, you might say, value a certain kind of musical art.
Yep.
Whereas you might make the split that the uneducated or the less educated or the less interested perhaps fall into this other camp of appreciating popular music over that. And I think what Frith says here is that we do see a split in understanding of music. And so you see sort of class splitting. But for us, as we look at serving our churches, we really have folks on both sides and all in between that fall into these different camps. So how do you, Steve, see how we approach planning our services when it comes to this discussion of what is great music versus what is simple music versus what is high art or low art?
Man, what an interesting conversation with a lot of different avenues, Kip. I think that if you're a church musician, I think we all can appreciate, whether it be Christmas Eve or Easter, we can appreciate sort of the arrangements that go to the next level. You know what I'm talking about? Maybe we have brass that comes in or special musicians coming in and kind of elevating the complexity of the music in a way that kind of aids with the kind of the specialness of the day. So I kind of resonate with there's a way in which great music done really well, we all can appreciate. That being said, I think there's an artificial divide here. For some people, church music is organ, handbell, orchestra, choir, and popular music is like drum set, electric guitar, on down that line, acoustic guitar, piano, and synth. And then sometimes that becomes the divide, and that church music is high art, and then this other thing that happens in church is commercial or popular. And I think that one important thing in the conversation is to realize that you can go to a church service led by an organ that is incredibly moving and powerful and emotional, and the music is impactful. And you can go to a church service where the music is led by more modern instruments and have that same experience. And I think maybe that's your point, right? You can play a cello really well. You can play a cello poorly. You can play a bass guitar really well. You can play a bass guitar poorly. And on top of that, not just well or poorly, but is it supporting the message of the song that it's being set to? So that's one kind of area I think the conversation goes into, is sort of church music, popular music, and where those divides are.
Yeah, I love that. Something that comes to mind. In one of our tunes we released this Lent, "Broken for Our Brokenness," a gentleman named Brent Milligan played electric bass on the track. And as we were listening, he's also a producer. As we were listening through, he said, you know what, I could put some cello on this as well. And so after the session, he went home and laid down a few different parts of just the most gorgeous cello. And we've gotten questions asking about the notation being available for that exact cello. And we see these gifts that he brings in these two different areas, and all set to serve the same exact song, but certainly bringing different things, bringing different pieces to the music. Neither one more important than the other, but both communicating something different. And there doesn't have to be to your point, there doesn't have to be, well, this cello part is church music and this electric bass part is secular music. Both can be used in context depending on what they're trying to serve, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. So the next thing that we want to talk about a little bit again, and we covered this pretty heavily in the last podcast, is emotion. And again, as we do this two sides of the fence thing, I think that we have seen that the modern worship music movement certainly was and has been informed by denominations in large part that have a different have a different theological outlook on worship and on what's happening. And
certainly in the mainstream.
Yes. And so what I see a lot nowadays is this conflation, right? Where we say, okay, this is modern worship music. It's done in this commercial style. Therefore, it's emulating and copying this particular set of mainstream worship movements. And therefore, and those mainstream worship movements using emotion in a way that is meant to bring God nearer. And so there's this conflation of saying, well, the music sounds the same as this, and therefore it is the same as this. And so the response to that may be to say, let's stay away from anything that may create an emotional experience that is heightened. And what I think I wanted to talk about today is, again, in Luther, we see the greatest commendation of music being that it can stir up the emotions of God's people.
Yeah.
And so instead of saying emotion is bad, this genre of music stirs up a lot of emotion. So instead of that, we want to stimulate our companions, right? In the way that Luther said, let's attempt to comfort the sad, to terrify the happy, to encourage the despairing, to humble the proud, to calm the passionate, appease those full of hate. Emotion is not something to shut off because it represents or sounds similar or gives us perhaps a connotation of something that we've heard or seen from a certain movement, but rather we can, with freedom and with great responsibility, seek to use music to proclaim the gospel in all sorts of different ways that create all sorts of different emotions.
Yeah, and I think that an interesting point here is to bring up Roy Rappaport, who's an anthropologist.
I knew you were going to bring up Roy. Here we go.
But he reminds us that there's two phases really to take note of when it comes to anything that you're doing. Like, this is one example, like leading a song for a congregation to sing.
Mm-hmm.
There's encoding. Encoding is the process of writing. So you encode a song on a piece of sheet music. You know, it has lyrics and it has chords and notation for dynamics. That is a piece of music that's encoded. But then every piece of music needs to then be what he called indexed. But for us, we could say it's like performed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a lot of ways, it's how we index the songs, how we forgive the word perform. For some people has a negative connotation, but I just mean really enact. We sing it, we play it. The way that we do that really informs the meaning in a way that could be intangible for some leaders. And this is what I mean. Like, if you're singing a song about the joy of you have for Jesus, and you're so thankful for him, and you're responding in joy, a leader can be like, come on, everyone, sing, come on, like, get really fervent, or get really behind this, or, don't you feel the Holy Spirit? And that's an indexing of the song that's informing the meaning and leaning more towards those other traditions. But a Lutheran indexing of a performance might instead be like, man, God is so good in Jesus Christ. Let's give thanks with these words of joy because of all he's done. So you're not trying to whip up people into a frenzy of praise. That's not important for us. But you're trying to lay out what God has done in Jesus Christ, the clear proclamation, and give the people a chance to respond in joy. And so I think just that's something I thought about what you were saying. As we use instruments, it's not about the instruments. It's about how you use them. And it's about the approach you take in the leadership of what you're doing. I want to say one more thing about this, Kip, if that's okay, is there's a book by Philip Magnus called Church Music for the Care of Souls. And in this book, Philip Magnus points out, and he's related to this high culture, low culture conversation we just had. And he says that people think the organ's the king of instruments, because of all these reasons. It sounds like the human voice, and it's so versatile, and it could do percussive and sustain, and it's a wonderful instrument. And it is a wonderful instrument. But then he pulls a prophetic move on them, and just like Amos, and he says, no, it's actually not the king of instruments. The king of instruments, he said, is the voice of the congregation. And whatever instrument helps the congregation sing their song, the Lord's song, that is the correct instrumentation for the music. And so that perspective isn't high, low culture, et cetera, et cetera. It's the idea that for the community that you're in, whatever instrument helps people sing the Lord's song, that is the key instrument. And I find that really, really kind of an encouragement that we're not going to get bogged down with this instrument, that instrument. There's freedom, but really, what really matters is the proclamation of the Lord's song in the mouth of God's people.
I love that. Well, I love what you said about indexing, and then as you went into instrumentation, it's perfect because that's right where we're going. Instrumentation is next here, and I have this little thought experiment that I'd like to run by, if you don't mind.
Oh, let's do it.
Now, Luther, again, wrote of how David used instruments to sharpen the impact that music could have in bringing him comfort and joy in his faith. Karl Halter and Karl Schalk, which some of y'all out there may know those names, demonstrate how this might be done with organ, to your point, Steve. Here we go. So here's a long quote about using the organ in service of the church. The most important function of the liturgical organist is that of effectively introducing and leading the congregational singing of the liturgy and hymns. Effective leadership here can do much to make worship the exciting adventure it is at its best. Through the use of effective intonations or introductions, carefully chosen tempi, rhythmic playing, appropriately chosen registration, judicious use of varied accompaniments, the occasional singing of a stanza without accompaniment, and especially careful use of alternation between congregation, singers, and organ in both liturgy and hymnody, the organist sets to a very great degree the spirit of worship and carries its momentum from beginning to end. Just right along the lines of what you were saying, Steve. Now, this is a wonderful example of the way in which instruments can be used to communicate the gospel more sharply. Now, I did a little thought experiment. I'm going to read that quote again, but I'm going to substitute the organ for a different instrument.
Okay.
So let's see how this strikes you. The most important function of the liturgical electric guitarist is that of effectively introducing and leading the congregational singing of the liturgy and hymns. Effective leadership here can do much to make worship the exciting adventure it is at its best. Through the use of effective intonations or introductions, carefully chosen tempi, rhythmic playing, appropriately chosen registration, judicious use of varied accompaniments, the occasional singing of a stanza without accompaniment, and especially careful use of alternation between congregation, singers, and electric guitar. In both liturgy and hymnody, the electric guitar sets to a very great degree the spirit of worship and carries its momentum from beginning to end. So I think that speaks exactly to your point, Steve, of regardless of the instrument, it's the way that it's used, right?
I see what you did there. I see you, Kip.
Did you see that? See what just happened?
Yeah. Well, you're giving us a vocation. I mean, electric guitar players sometimes get a bad rap because they show up with all their gear and they start playing big solos, and that's what you think it's all about.
Yeah.
But it's a vocation. It's a musical vocation, and I love how that has laid it out. What's the role of music? And that's a really good description.
Yeah, and for practical application's sake, it's important for us as leaders, as directors of parish music, worship leaders, music directors. This isn't just to say, hey, it's okay to have electric guitar too. That's not the point of this exercise. The main point is to say that we should be educating each of our instrumentalists, helping them understand that they are communicating to a very great degree. They are responsible for the spirit of worship, and they carry the worship's momentum from beginning to end, as Schalk says. Yeah. And so regardless of your instrument, this isn't, again, when we talk about freedom, this isn't just some quote to say you can have any instrument you want and everything's okay. It's to say every instrument can glorify God and can lead his people in singing. To your point, whatever instrument helps the congregation to in the praise of their Savior is important. And there are very specific, from the most sophisticated instrument you can think of, which I think is the cello, as far as I could tell, to the most basic,
it's probably the mandolin, honestly.
There you go.
It probably is. You got to tune that thing so much.
Well, I prefer just a synthesizer mandolin sound, but no, a regular mandolin is great. All that to say, we have this freedom, but really, again, like you said, vocationally, we're to use any and all of these instruments to the best of our abilities, and for the service in service of our people and their praise.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So one thing I want to touch on as well, we talked about musical diversity. We talked about vocation. I don't want to get too far into it. There's a great, in my thesis, I quote Gene Veith and talk a little bit about vocation there. But just really quickly here, we talked last episode about how Luther had songs he was accustomed to in his youth. And one of the arguments I see, and you hear a lot, and it's understandable, is that we as we continue to move forward chronologically in time, we have folks of different generations that appreciate and love different styles or different songs. And we certainly have several generations that appreciated hymns from the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, right? I think that our musical tastes have been accelerated since the 40s and 50s, and since radio hit, and then we, of course, now in the 21st century we're streaming any kind of song that you could possibly think of in any kind of style. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about supplementing versus supplanting. One of the things that we talk about a little bit when we talk about writing new songs for the Songwriter Initiative is that we're not here to supplant all the music of our great church history. We're here to supplement it. And I just wanted to get your take on how we balance between the preferences of our people, the rich history that we've talked about in some other episodes, the rich, beautiful text and melodies and compositions of the past in our tradition. How do we balance all of that, Steve? How do we faithfully and in love work with one another as a church?
Yeah, I love the phrase yes and, or both and, or the great Lutheran answer is just yes, this or that, and you say yes. And I think that's the way it is with this too. And that's one of the big aspects of our mission at the Center for Worship Leadership. If you haven't yet heard our, what's the album Live from Wally, Kip? What's it called? What's the actual title?
The Songwriter Initiative Live, Volume 2.
Volume 2. Great. Yeah. And so if you haven't heard that album yet, I invite you to listen to it. It's available on Spotify and YouTube and all the places like that. And it's from our conference last year. And what we did is we had some songs on organ and choir, and some songs with organ, choir, and band, and some songs with band. And I think the beauty of the rich history of Lutheran music needs to remain an important part of our musical expression in our congregations. And I think that can be hard for some people, mainly because of the shift of instrumentation. Anyone who's, I think we had an interview with Brendan Norp, and he shared with us a few weeks ago how hard it is sometimes to play an old hymn on the guitar. And so one of the things that we're trying to do at the Center for Worship Leadership is provide and curate arrangements of older hymns, older songs in our tradition for congregations that are used to being guitar-led or piano-led and that work well. Because we don't want that change in instrumentation to cut off this rich heritage. But you need resources. And what I found in my congregation, at least, is my congregation loves singing old songs and new songs and everything in between. But I think you get in trouble when you say no more new, just old, or you say nothing older than 1980 or something like this. That's a tragic stance. So yes, yes, Lutheran music has such a strong heritage, and we should be singing songs from across our catalog.
Okay, Steve. Well, I think that's a great place to stop for the day, to finish out our series on Luther. I just want to say these last few things about Luther and diverse creativity in worship. Luther's pronouncement of music as a creation and gift of God puts an end to Plato's ancient quarrel between philosophy and poetry. The reluctance in Augustine is traded for enthusiasm. The restrictions placed by Calvin give way to unlimited possibilities. By setting this foundation of music as gift, Luther sets the composer's conscience free. When we take Luther's posture of receiving this mystery as a gift, we open up a world of possibilities. If we are to reach an ever-changing world with the gospel, we must set composers free. In the words of Karl Schalk again, this is the unique task of church composers, to speak meaningfully and forcefully in accents which ring unmistakably with the sounds, rhythms, and harmonies of our day. Luther's love for music in many forms sets musical composers free to use any and all words, instruments, rhythms, melodies, and harmonies for the praise of God and the proclamation of the gospel. Luther's theology of music encourages church musicians to compose diverse, creative music with fervency, with feeling, and with freedom. Steve, thanks for going on this ride with me today. Everyone can check out all of our Lutheran hymns on weaveworship.com and all of our new TSI songs on weaveworship.com. We've tried our best to supplement this great history of music in our church body on weaveworship.com. And I don't know how many more times I can say it. Steve, what do you have for us?
Kip, what a blast. Thank you for writing this master's thesis and sharing it with us. Listener, I hope you enjoyed it. And it really is such an interesting take on learning about aesthetics and music. And Kip, it's been a blast. Thanks for taking us through it.
Right on.